Welcome to Viva Buckets.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. We're in a different room today, different brand.
Setting,
And last episode you and Carlos talked about how Humble Grape got started.
yeah, that was a fun conversation.
Yeah, the inspiration, your journey, and just the last 15 years of you.
Do I need to clip it on?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, here we go.
So yeah, the whole inspiration behind Humble Grape, how it all got started, and in this episode, I guess we could talk a bit more about the producers that you've had the joy of working.
Some of the vineyards we buy wine from, we've got some amazing producers. Yeah, I'm very excited about them.
Yes. So over the last 15 years, obviously you've been able to keep the brand going and growing, and you've had the pleasure probably of working with some of the world's best producers. So I guess before we dive into the stories and the people behind the bottle, I'm wondering, is it safe to say that you've tasted thousands of wines over the last few?
This is a good question.
Do you have a bottle count?
I don't know. I don't. Do I have a bottle count? It's too early to have that conversation. It's really funny because I had a fine wine dinner with a bunch of clients last night in our Canary Wharf branch. And someone asked David Green if he had a bottle count.
Yeah.
And he actually managed to calculate it, and it was over 30,000.
Yeah.
But I have absolutely no idea what mine is. But I can tell you a funny story. As in the early days, when I was like really obsessed with wine, I managed to organize a pass to the Bordeaux en Primeur.
Yeah.
So what that is you go to Bordeaux and you've got all the vineyards on the left bank, which is predominantly Cab Sauv, Merlot, like Lafite and Latour and Margaux and all those. And then you've got the right bank, which is Pomerol and Saint-Emilion, stuff like Petrus and Cheval Blanc and stuff like that. And all these amazing vineyards, but there's thousands of Bordeaux vineyards, right? So this en primeur tasting is a tasting that they hold every year, and it's to try the new wines before they've been bottled. And then you can buy them, and then they release them a year later. So it's like buying a wine future.
Okay.
But back in the day, like Humble Grape was like super early, and we had absolutely no money. So I flew over, and then I rented this tiny little car. It was one of those little rinky-dink things, like it almost should have had 3 wheels instead of 4.
Yeah.
like it was a Toyota Aygo or something, but much even smaller than that, if you can imagine. And I did the whole left bank in the morning, which is literally like 5 or 6 tastings at 5 or 6 different chateaux, and each chateau had hundreds of wine.
Yeah.
And then I did the whole right bank in the afternoon. So I think I probably tasted in one day somewhere between 400 and 500 wines.
And you were driving.
And I was driving, but you don't swallow.
You
don't swallow. you don't swallow everything.
Oh, I'd be so tempted.
And then I got home to my hotel at like 8 o'clock that night, and I was so exhausted. I just fell asleep and just slept until like 10 o'clock the next morning.
That's absolutely nuts.
It was nuts, yeah. So how many bottles have I tried in my life? I have no idea. But my record for a day is 500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Impressive. Well, some would say a dream job.
Yeah, but if you own the chocolate factory, right, eventually you start hating chocolate. But that hasn't happened to me with wine, thankfully.
Yeah. And so is that every year?
Yeah, Bordeaux en Primeur every year.
God.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. I think at like the diploma, you taste around 300, 400.
Yeah, if you do the WSET diploma, you taste 300 wines.
Yeah.
I haven't done diploma. I've done level 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carlos and a few others at Humble Grape have done diploma.
Yeah.
Studious fellows, yeah.
Yeah, our wine team, God, mad. But yeah, so safe to say we've tasted, as a company, probably.
Oh, over 50,000, 100,000 bottles, easily, yeah.
And even though it does sound like a dream job, I can imagine it's quite overwhelming.
It is overwhelming, like tasting wine. And when you have a business like Humble Grape, it's better to have a group of people choosing the wine, because everyone has a different palate.
Yeah.
And my palate leans towards bigger kind of reds.
Yeah.
And like really like complex, spicy kind of whites, unusual kinds of whites that some people might dislike.
Yeah.
Like Rhone Valley whites, or like that kind of stuff, Marsanne, Roussanne, like bigger, sometimes bigger oakier Chardonnays and stuff, and then some of the weird grape varieties like Malvasia and stuff that people just don't really get into that easily.
Right.
Like my favorite South African wine is a Palomino made by Blackwater, and Palomino is actually a grape that they used to make sherry with. And Francois Haasbroek discovered an old Palomino vineyard in the Western Cape somewhere. It was literally, it had been abandoned, and they were like bush vines, and they used to make spirits with the Palomino grapes in South Africa. They used to make brandy back in the day, and he discovered it and rejuvenated it, and he's now got a 10-year lease on it, and he's picking these old vine Palomino grapes, which are amazing because the old vine stuff, the grapes are a lot smaller and there's fewer of them, but they're a lot more concentrated and complex. So the wine they make is a lot more complex. And this Palomino is probably like a wine it's not very expensive. I think it's 25-30 pound a bottle retail. Yeah. And it's a wine that I just can't stop thinking about. If someone asks me, is there a white that you love? It's the Blackwater Palomino. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
I guess I'm not sure if it was you or Carlos who said it the other day, but these really complex wines, you learn how to love them.
Yes.
It's not something well, some people probably love them from the beginning, but
it is. That's an interesting concept in itself, because I remember as a kid, like getting into music, and you had all this pop music come out, and then you listen to something and you love it immediately, and then like a few months later you don't like it anymore. Yeah. And I remember the first time I heard U2, and I was thinking, that's weird. Not sure I like that. Yeah. And then like a few months later, listened to it again, and then and now even to this day, it's one of my favorite bands. Yeah. And all the other stuff I immediately loved when I was a kid. I don't even remember who they are anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that comparison, because you also said you said so many people loved them and they told you this is the band to like right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just not how it works.
No, it's not how it works.
It's for yourself. Personal. Yeah.
So how did you get into wine?
Oh God. Very recently, to be fair. When I started working here, that's when I really started appreciating wine. I mean, I always liked and loved drinking it, but I don't think I ever really understood it. Yeah. And I'm kind of the perfect example of why you started the company. I was always intimidated, never knew what to do, and somebody here pours me a glass to taste, and I was like, I'm just going to pretend like I know what I'm doing. And I don't even know if I would have noticed if it was corked, to be honest. Yeah. And I think the first tasting I did here, and Carlos explained how to actually taste a wine, I think
the penny dropped.
The penny dropped.
That's interesting.
That was the first time I was like, oh my God, it's so easy. Yeah. To taste it.
And I think the wine trade and restaurants at large have missed a trick here, because it's not about giving the wine a really cool, interesting wine to the customer. It's about giving the customer something that they're going to love. Yeah. It's our job to find a wine that customers are going to love. It's so simple. That's what we do at Humble Grape. Yeah. If a customer comes to Humble Grape, it doesn't matter if they're used to drinking, expensive top burgundies, or they've never had wine in their lives. It's our job to give them a wine they're going to love. Yeah. And we won't stop until we've succeeded.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really important for the guests to know. We will put in the effort and the time to figure out what they like, which a lot of restaurants and wine bars just don't do. Yeah. And I guess when you say find the wine you love, in those thousands of wines that you've tasted, has there been one wine where you were immediately like, I need this in my portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of fine wines, there are those moments where you try something and it's like hard to distinguish between whether all the hype and everything you've been told about the vintage and the beautiful estate that you walk into, and how everyone, like a lot of really serious people, are really into the wine. Yeah. And then you taste it. It's hard to tell whether that's influencing you or not. Yeah. It's not like you've just tasted something blind. You have no idea how cheap or expensive it is. There's nothing. There's no context, and then you fall in love with it. So, like some of the wines that I've tried in my life, I mean, the Chateau Cheval Blanc 2009. Yeah. Bordeaux is something that sticks in my mind, and then the Yquem 2001. But those are ridiculously expensive wines that I haven't drunk since, and can't afford to drink, and like most of our customers can't afford to, or aren't prepared to pay, £500 for a bottle of wine. Yeah. So that kind of sticks in my mind. But then there's a lot of like really interesting, affordable wines that kind of stick as well.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the Blackwater Palomino, and also another South African red that sticks in my mind from the very first time I tried it, because I didn't really have any context to understand, is probably the Bartony Chardonnay.
Yeah.
It's something like that I know you love as well.
Yeah.
And it sticks with me. And the Bartony Hourglass Chardonnay, which is the biggest sister, or the bigger brother, whatever you'd like to call it. And then the Rainbow's End Cabernet Franc, because I've always absolutely loved Cabernet Franc.
Yeah.
And I discovered Cabernet Franc in the Loire Valley. I think it must have been 2011. I went there for a couple of weeks with my family. And again, it was a difficult grape to get my head around, because Cabernet Franc isn't like opulent like Cab Sauv. And the Loire Valley is quite cool climate, so the wines don't get really ripe.
Right.
And I remember like tasting a lot of wine and thinking, I'm not sure I get this Cab Franc thing. And then towards the end of the holiday, I discovered a wine that we now stock called Ancestral, which is kind of like a French take on ancestral, but they've just changed the lettering around.
Yeah.
And it's a Chinon made by Domaine Jourdan, and it's like it's actually Pichard Jourdan, because the original guy was Pichard, Pichard, and then Jourdan came in as a partner, so now it's a Pichard Jourdan. So it's a really high end Chinon.
Yeah.
From the Loire Valley.
Yeah.
And it's just like one of these wines that I wasn't really expecting something, because I'd been in the Loire Valley for a whole week. I got a whole bunch of vineyards to send me a ton of wine, and I tried all the wines, and there were some that I kind of liked and some that I kind of didn't. And then I remember I was sitting in the dining room of this house that we'd rented. And the kids were sleeping upstairs because they were like 9 months old. And my wife and I, we opened this bottle one afternoon.
Yeah.
And I discovered it in a little wine shop, because all the wines they'd sent us, we tried everything. And some of them were nice, but I just didn't really get the Cab Franc thing. And then I went to a little wine shop in Chinon, which is next to this beautiful old church.
Yeah.
And I asked the guy in the wine shop, like, give me something really super interesting. And he gave me this wine. I think it was like €6 or €8. I can't even remember how much it cost in the wine shop.
Yeah.
And then a few days later, I opened it and drank it. And then that wine absolutely blew my mind. It was like, okay, now I get it. Cab Franc, Loire Valley. This one is like, I was like so obsessed with that wine, I just had to have it.
Yeah.
So I remember like back in 2011, like a lot of French companies didn't really have websites and stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even today they struggle a bit, with their labels and stuff. They're not really into marketing. It's more
no, they don't really have to be. They care more about the wine,
substance over form.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is a really funny story. So the Domaine Pichard was just basically like a tiny little vineyard. Like I think they had 3 or 4 hectares, and I managed to find the number of the vineyard by going back to the wine shop, and the guy gave me a little leaflet of the vineyard, and it just basically had a mobile number on it. That was it. No, it didn't have a mobile number, just had a landline.
Yeah. And
I called the landline, and this kind of rude French guy, like must have been an old, picked up the phone, and my French wasn't that great back in 2011. It was a bit broken and all over the place. So, and I tried to explain to him that I wanted to buy his wine, and he just wasn't interested. He just put the phone down on me.
Oh, really?
Right, yeah. And
yeah.
But I was so obsessed with the wine. I was persistent. I tried again a few days later.
Yeah.
And he just he wasn't interested. And I was like, that's weird. People who don't want to sell their wine, how does that work? So then I tried one last time. I was like, give him another call. I practiced a few more lines, And I called, and this lady answered the phone. She must have been his wife.
Yeah.
And in my broken French, I managed to have a conversation with her. And she said, yeah, my husband's a really grumpy old bastard, but I'm going to make him meet you, right? And and she gave me these really weird directions to drive to the middle of nowhere. And there's basically on the corner of this road and this road, there's like this old shed. You've just got to wait there. And it was like a Friday afternoon. And I remember driving there, I get there, and I sat there for like 45 minutes. I thought the guy wasn't going to come.
Yeah.
He pitched up, like he hardly said a word to me, like super surly. And then he takes me to this old shed where there's a tractor, and then like you kind of walk downstairs, and there was like a little room there. We had some wines. He had like 5 or 6 wines.
Yeah.
And obviously the one that I was in love with was there, the Ancestral.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm like, that's that bad boy. And like he didn't take it out, although I told him all about it, and I was like gushing over it. He didn't take it out. He made me drink all these other wines. He had like 7 other wines, and he hardly said much. He just poured the wine for me, and then at the end, I got to taste that wine again, and it was just as lovely as I remembered.
Yeah.
And then he said to me, okay, so like, which wines do you want to buy? He gave me some prices. He just wrote them down on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
He just made them up on the spot.
Okay.
And I bet you they were special prices just for me, right? Very special prices. So, so I said to him, oh yeah, I'm not really interested in these other ones. I just want to buy 600 bottles because that's what fits on a pallet. So you have to buy a pallet. A pallet's between 600 and 720.
Yeah.
So whether you bring 100 bottles or 600 bottles, you have to put them on a pallet, and it costs the same ship from France to the UK.
Yeah.
It costs about £300 to bring a pallet over.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to fill the pallet up.
Yeah. Remind me, what year was this?
So this is 2011.
Okay.
Yeah, 2011.
Yeah.
So I said to him, I want the 600 bottles of that wine, and he kind of just like laughed at me.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you can't have 600 bottles of that wine. He said, you can have 120 bottles of that wine, but you've got to buy 300 bottles of this wine and 300 bottles of that wine as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want those wines. And he's like, no, that's not how it works.
Right.
You've got to buy those other wines if you want to get this one. And I was like sitting there going, okay, this is weird. I hadn't come across this before, but this is obviously how this guy operates. Mm-hmm. And I loved the wine so much that I decided, okay, I'm going to buy those other wines. And if I can't sell them, I'll just drink them myself or give them to friends or whatever. Yeah. So I ended up buying the wines, and the other wines, I grew to love them as well.
Okay, got you.
But I got the top wine, and we're going to put a little bottle shot of this wine. It's like my favorite Cab Franc from France. And years later, I came across a wine connoisseur who spent a lot of time in Burgundy. Mm. And he told me a really interesting story that wine was actually quite famous in France. And they did a blind tasting with that, and I think it was a Bordeaux Haut-Brion, right? Which is like also, it's got some Cab Franc and some Cab Sauv in it. Yeah. And a few other famous wines. I can't remember what they were. They did a blind tasting, and this wine, which is a tenth of the price, actually won the blind tasting. That's all. And it was a bunch of French guys, and I it's just like those kinds of things. Yeah. I think I've been super lucky in wine, is that I've been, I don't know, somehow, like, I don't think I have an amazing palate. I think I've just been very lucky to discover wines like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think you've been tasting so many wines and had the pleasure of meeting so many also grumpy winemakers in that case. If anyone wants to try the wine, you can obviously buy it in our shops, drink it in the bar, drink it in our bars and restaurants. But when it comes to picking these wines, nowadays we have certain criteria that we go by. So what are those that you kind of, or like, how do you pick wines? How do you pick winemakers? What criteria must they hit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the whole ethos around Humble Grape is that we, like, firstly, we want to work with really lovely human beings. Yeah. That's like number one. Like, and people don't think about it, but I don't want to support a company or a product or a person that I don't think is like a really decent, lovely human being. That's why we don't sell Coca-Cola. You know, I'm not saying people who work for Coca-Cola are bad people. It's just like, it's not a ethos or a product I want to support. So, you know, that's the first criteria, working with lovely human beings. So even if we find a wine we love and the people aren't very nice, then we don't work with them. This grumpy old French boy turned out to be really lovely. He was just super skeptical because he'd met a whole bunch of people in his life who rock up to his vineyard and like try his wine and waste his time and don't buy anything from him. Yeah. So once we got over the skepticism, and also once I told him I was South African, he liked me a bit more.
Oh, did he think you were British?
Yeah, he did. Oh, the Springboks. I'm like, the Springboks. Anyway, so the criteria for Humble Grape to buy wine, number one, has to be like preferably a small family-owned vineyard, with like people who just love what they do, and they just genuinely like pour their heart and soul into it. Like it's interesting if you see like a business run by a founder versus a business run by a corporate.
Yeah.
Like no one you could hire is ever going to love your business as much as the founder does, or care about it as much.
Yeah.
Same for a vineyard.
Yeah.
No one is going to love and care for a vineyard like the owners of that vineyard.
Yeah.
The people who make their living from the land and from those vines, they pour their heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
And the wine it's just special on another level. If some big corporation owns it, they hire all these expensive guys and consultants, and they can make a beautiful wine, but somehow it lacks that little something special.
Yeah.
That when a person who owns the vineyard, or a family that's owned the vineyard for hundreds of years, is pouring their heart and soul into that, and that's how they make their living. Those vines are just different. They sing. It's a beautiful thing. So small family owned, lovely people. We only bring wines in that are organic or biodynamic, and if they are organic and biodynamic but they don't have the certification, we still bring them in, because we can check all the criteria, but sometimes they don't get certification because they're too small, or there's vineyards around them that are doing something that doesn't allow that vineyard to be organic or biodynamic. But and I'm not saying that all organic or biodynamic wines are good, because there are some rubbish ones and there are some amazing wines that aren't organic and biodynamic. But for us, it's something that's very important, because we care about, our customers' health, the health of the environment, the health of the planet, and we want to support those kinds of wines.
Yeah.
So that's the next criteria, is organic, biodynamic. Then the last criteria, which I think is probably one of the most important, is we always look for something that is exceptional quality to price ratio.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, if you buy a bottle from us, a retail that retails at £20 or £50 or £100, like that 50, if you buy that £50 wine from us, it's probably going to be at least 50% better quality than another £50 wine somewhere, because we really look very hard for price quality ratio stuff.
Yeah.
And I know that's a bit of a broad sweeping statement, and it's not true for all of our wines, but it's something that we really try and go for.
Yeah.
And like a wine is just expensive because it's expensive, and the quality doesn't stand up to the price. Like we're not super into that. And our customers, I think our customers like that, and that's why they trust our brand, is because we're always getting these little hidden gems over. Yeah. Whether you're paying 15, 20, 30, 40 pound a bottle, it's going to be something pretty interesting.
Yeah, the thing is with our wines, I feel like when you get into it a bit more, they ruin supermarket wines for you.
Yeah.
Because I've only ever had like relatively cheap Chardonnays. In Germany, they're much cheaper, so you get the £2 bottle of Chardonnay, and I never liked it until someone handed me, I think it was Carlos, handed me the Bartonnet. I was like, oh my god, I do love it.
Yeah, and it's kind of special, right? Like like if you just drinking because you like the taste of wine and you want to get that alcohol effect, then supermarket is fine.
Yes.
But if you want something like a little bit more interesting, like it's got a more interesting story behind it, it's going to have less sulfites, it's going to have zero chemicals, that kind of stuff. When you're drinking those kinds of wines, it's just it's just another level.
Yeah. And I guess also for our customers, what we really want to convey is that whenever they buy a bottle at our bars or in our shops, they support these 4 or 5 people on the vineyard that don't really have the means to do so themselves.
That's really interesting. I think this is something that you said the other day, is that our customers are our heroes, because these tiny little vineyards all over the world, it's usually like 2 or 3 people. There's the husband makes the wine and the wife works in the vineyard, or vice versa. And they may have a son or a daughter helping them, or an uncle. It's really tough to run that, and they aren't naturally skilled at sales and marketing, or have the time or the ability or the budget to get those wines in front of an international audience. So they do a lot of sales from the cellar door and locally, and then like someone like us comes along and discovers them, and we can transform their future. So the customers that are buying these tiny little boutique vineyards that are relatively unknown brands, maybe the region's known but the brand is unknown, they are supporting these people by doing that, and supporting the sustainability and the ethos that they encompass. all that kind of stuff, which is really fantastic.
Yeah. So I guess when customers buy, maybe just ask the staff about the story behind the bottle, because there's likely going to be one.
There's always a story, and if there isn't one, we'll make one up.
Exactly. With regards to these stories, like there's so many beautiful stories behind our producers and the wines. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, that's difficult. There's just so many. I can tell a few funny ones though, like the Portuguese one we import from the Dow. So the Dow is it's like the Burgundy of Portugal. They make more elegant wines there. Like the Douro, they make big heavy reds, and the Dow is a bit more refined and elegant. There's the Quinta de Seix. I think I'm saying it correctly. Saes. Quinta de Seix, and they've got this fabulous old basset hound. I think he's called Fred, or I'm not forgetting his name wrong. Or Tobias. Tobias is the dog, and he's just a character. He goes around with the winemaker Maria everywhere, and Maria is the daughter, and her dad. They make the wine together, and they manage the vineyards and everything. And the dad is a real character. He's an ex-architect, and then fell in love with wine and started making wine like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was telling me that because they do everything biodynamically, they have got these donkeys that they use to plow the fields and stuff. And they've got this one particular donkey that's super grumpy. And like whenever the old boy is in the vineyards and something, if he's not wary and keeping an eye out, it'll come and bite him. So he's got like bite marks on his shoulder from this donkey just comes and bites him. Must be upset about something.
Oh, bless him.
So yeah, there's those funny little stories, that the winemakers tell us.
They're just that's adorable.
And the first time I met them, they were like, "Oh yeah, you from South Africa? You guys have got hippos there?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, what's this? Where's this conversation going?"
Yeah.
And they said they had one vintage that was so out of control busy that they didn't get time to do any work around the house, and their swimming pool went green. Completely green, so green and full of slime and stuff that you could hide a hippo in there. And they wanted to know where they could get a hippo because they thought the hippo would be able to clean their swimming pool from them. And I was like, just because I'm from South Africa doesn't mean I can find you a hippo. Right?
Yeah. That is so random. Also, you don't want a hippo to... No. If a hippo bites you...
Yeah, that'll be a bit worse than a donkey,
It would be a little bit worse. That is really sweet.
Yeah.
And I guess because you work so closely with these producers, you're able to listen to all these stories.
Yeah.
And I think it's also safe to say that the relationships that you have with these producers go beyond business.
Absolutely.
At this point. So
it's very deep. It's a like, I think in business you have to have long-term relationships with your team, with your clients, and with your suppliers, especially. Long-term, I mean, like hopefully forever, right?
Yeah.
Like the architect we use to design Humble Grapes has been with us since the very beginning. The builders have been from the very beginning. Like those kinds of people that we work with, people that do an amazing job, and like we can trust them to fix things when stuff go wrong.
Yeah.
Like I'm happy to pay more for their services because they're just so reliable, and we're just on the same page. So we never shop around for cheaper stuff. And when it comes to vineyards, like we've got some deep relationships with some people.
Yeah.
Like one of the vineyards in particular in South Africa. I'm not going to mention the name on the podcast, but South Africa had a really tough time during COVID, and it was illegal to sell alcohol, but they also made it illegal to transport alcohol.
In South Africa?
In South Africa during COVID, they made it illegal to transport alcohol.
You couldn't buy alcohol.
You couldn't legally buy alcohol, or I think even cigarettes they banned at some stage.
During the pandemic.
During the pandemic.
Without alcohol.
Yeah. So
Jesus
I know. Those poor bastards. How did they survive? Right?
Yeah.
So but the transport of alcohol was banned as well.
That is absolutely amazing.
Like imagine you're a vineyard in the Cape, and the harbour is literally a half an hour drive or an hour's drive from your vineyard.
Yeah.
And you've got these international clients begging for your products. You're running out of money.
Yeah.
And you can't sell your wine, right?
Yeah, that is ridiculous.
So I had a conversation with one of the vineyards, like literally in the middle of the pandemic, and I was having a conversation with him, and I could just hear something in his voice, like it was really hard. And I said to him, "Hey, what's going on? Like you sound like he told me about this whole story.
Yeah.
And I'm quite commercial, so I very quickly put two and two together. And I said to him, "Are you guys running out of money? Are you like?" And he was like, "Yeah, we're in like really bad shape." So I said to him, "Look, I'm gonna do something for you." So after I put the phone down, I went and spoke to our finance team, and we looked at the numbers, and we pre-bought a whole ton of wine from them. So we sent them the money, knowing that they would only be able to ship the wine 6 months later or whenever they lifted this ban.
That is nice.
And those guys will never forget us, right?
Yeah.
Because the money was lying in our bank account. I mean, we were also struggling during COVID, but we had a bit of money.
Yeah.
But with the currency being like 20-1, and and we were getting like 0.2% interest over here anyway. During those kind of COVID times, the interest rates were so low.
Yeah.
It didn't really bother us whether we had the money or they had the money, and they really needed it.
Yeah.
So we did that. We've done a few bits and pieces like that with some of the vineyards, just to kind of help them out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of relationship that you'll have forever, right? And those guys will always be super loyal to us, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's a really incredible story.
Yeah.
Also mad because South Africa is such a massive wine region that they would just ban.
They banned the sale of alcohol. I think it is because they were trying to protect people from domestic violence and stuff, because it was just so bad. People were all sitting at home, and that was one of the policies they brought up.
That is insane. Wow. Yeah, that's mad.
Yeah.
But it shows how deep these relationships go.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say that we love the underdogs.
Yes. We love an underdog.
I guess in terms of regions and grapes, I guess we do kind of focus on underrepresented regions. Obviously, we're widely spread, but do you have a region that you think needs a bit more love, a bit more attention?
So, it's interesting because I originally started buying wine from wine countries that I traveled to, and obviously I'd spent a lot of time in France. Yeah, because I lived in Paris when I was young. Lived in Paris for 2 years, and then I fell in love with wine while I was living there. So like France, and then obviously Italy, Spain, Portugal, all the European countries, we started importing from those super early, and then South Africa came later, and then we import wine from 26 different countries. We've got over 750 wines. There's a couple of gaps in our portfolio of places that I haven't visited properly. We've got some quirky stuff from Eastern Europe, Georgia, Macedonia, like really, really cool wines. We've got some interesting stuff from the US, California.
The Oregon wine made a bit of
Oregon Pinot and Pinot Gris. So the Pinot Noirs from Oregon are amazing, but I think probably like some of our most interesting wines that we have right now are from Santa Barbara and from like the area just north of around like the coastal area around LA, which is kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
The climate there is amazing, and they make some stunning wines, and those wines are a fraction of the price of the wines that you get in Napa and Sonoma. Yeah. And one vineyard in particular that we bring in called Ojai, Ojai, is just like, it's absolutely spectacular.
I don't think I've tried it.
It's ridiculous. You've got to try Ojai. They do Chardonnay and Pinot, and you're in. Sold.
To be fair, I'll try anything that the wine team put in front of me.
I've got my eye on a sample of Ojai that I spotted in the Fleet Street wine cellar yesterday. I'm going to try and go and get that for tonight's dinner.
Oh, nice. I love when Carlos whips out the samples. It's like, okay, we're going to do a bit of a taste.
Very nice.
And is there a wine that you would highlight to customers, or is there a wine that you wish people would buy a bit, like that in that portfolio, where it's like, I wish people would discover that a bit more?
That's a really interesting question. We were talking about this last night. Riesling, German Riesling. We poured a Riesling last night. It's the Ungeheuer von Winning. It's a Grand Cru. The quality is so off the charts, and it retails at £58 a bottle. And it's probably one of the top wines in the world. I mean, you would pay 400-500 quid a bottle for a Burgundy of the same quality.
Is that right?
It's just absolutely, it's exquisite, that wine.
Ungeheuer.
And the Ungeheuer and von Winning were awarded the in a competition. I think it was the Michelin Guide or something about 5 or 6 years ago. Out of 2,700 wineries, Von Winning won the award for the best producer of Riesling in the world, like globally.
No idea.
Right? So that's and their top wine from the best producer in the world retails at like 58 quid.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, right? So like we were drinking that last night, and people were like, "Okay, that's like it's off the charts to get that kind of quality." And I think German wine is just very underappreciated.
Yeah, it's another region that's undervalued. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think Riesling is another one that people just have a preconception. It's sweet wine. Me included. I didn't like Riesling until someone gave me Von Winning. Or Alsace.
Yes.
The Alsace one. Both from regions where you wouldn't really, where that people might not even heard of. I've never heard.
Yeah, the Alsace, which is on the border of Germany as well, with the Vosges Mountains. It's kind of cool climate. Yeah. It's kind of special with those mountains there.
Yeah.
I actually spent 4 days cycling around Alsace with my father-in-law 2 years ago. One autumn.
Bonding.
It was amazing. We had a great time. Yeah, we were just cycling around, tasting wine, having long lunches in the French countryside.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I guess that's something to kind of tell our customers. It's like, if you think you don't like a wine, just give it another try. Just ask the team.
Yeah. Just
change my mind.
Drink the bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll like it eventually.
Exactly. Now, obviously, we do kind of make sure we find the wine you love. But if you are adventurous in some way, it's always, or if you think you don't like it, challenge it at some point. Yeah.
So Enya, you run marketing for Humble Grape.
Yes.
How do you because you do a lot of thinking about how can we describe wines to our customers in a way that's a bit more interesting. Yeah. Because we don't want to be boring and bland, and we don't want to talk about chocolate and lead pencil and shavings and all that kind of stuff. So how are you trying to change that around for us?
I mean, even before I joined, you had an incredible copywriter who did a fantastic job at visualizing a wine, which I think really helps people understand a wine a bit better.
Yeah,
I think it's quite difficult to explain a wine in writing. It's easier to kind of taste it. So I think for us, when we sell a wine, it's easier. It's easy to sell a wine when people know the story behind it. So if they know that they support a vineyard of like 2, 3, 4 people.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we just try to go more into the straw. Do you know, like when we say, "Oh, wine tastes of strawberry," so that's easy to understand than an elegant finish.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is quite difficult, but I think visualizing a wine helps. Or saying, we have a Netflix wine, don't we?
Yeah.
So I think people, like, even though I know it's not something that some of you would immediately go to, I think us normal people would understand why this is more something you enjoy at home while watching Netflix.
That's true. And I think one of the tasting notes that is my favorite tasting note is, again, it's from Bartony. And the tasting note, so it's the Cabernet, and we don't talk about how it tastes and hints of chocolate and eucalyptus and all that kind of stuff that you get from Cabernet. The tasting note is just simply leopards and honey badgers wander through these eco-friendly mountain vineyards.
Yeah.
That's it. And then people come to Humble Grape and they're like, "Oh, where's the leopard wine or the honey badger wine?" Yes. And we know it's the Bartony Cabernet, right?
Yeah.
But we don't describe the taste on a lot of the wines. Maybe people can find that a little bit confusing, but it's pretty distinctive.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know much about wine. I'm not a sommelier, so I'm not going to be able to explain to our customers, "Oh, this has like medium tannins," because then people are like, "What the hell does that mean?"
Yeah, what is that? Yeah.
And there's one description, I forgot which wine it's for. I think it's one of the first ones you showed me. It was the Rockstar.
Oh, that's
was that Rainbow? No,
it's the Paradiesgarten Von Winning Riesling.
Yes, it kind of says Rockstar found in a
smashed up hotel room, sprinklers on,
with six Chardonnays.
6 Chardonnays lying in the bathtub.
Yeah, which is contastic. Yeah. So things like that, I think, is what customers love hearing.
Yeah.
No one wants to hear, obviously, unless you love wine and are a wine connoisseur. No one knows what an elegant finish means. So
what is an elegant finish? No idea.
Exactly. So I think you mentioned as well, kind of last question to wrap it up, but you mentioned that you haven't explored a lot of regions, or like there's some
There's
regions
a bunch
you
of
haven't
reasons
explored.
that I haven't explored yet.
So what's on your
So,
radar?
you know, there's two things I'd like to do next year. Firstly, is get to grips with English wine a bit better.
Mhm.
I'm really not that clued up on English wine. I've been avoiding
Yeah.
it for a long time because most English wines that are half decent are in all the supermarkets, and English wine has that problem that Napa had years ago. Very expensive, but not necessarily matching to quality.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people would argue with me on that, and you know, the climate here is very difficult for reds.
Mm-hmm.
But I have tasted some really interesting wines recently, and I'd like to explore England a bit more in terms of wine.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make that a mission next year. And then the other country that's like been making wine for thousands of years that I'm really ashamed we don't have any of their wines at Humble Grape yet is Greece.
Oh, Greece.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I had an Assyrtiko, must have been 15 years ago, and they put a little bit of pine tree resin in it. And like the wine was just so Marmite for me that I just completely went off Greek wines. But that's the wrong thing to do because there's thousands of other wine styles there, and I shouldn't tar them all with that brush, and I need to go back. So I'd love to go to Greece next year, or even one of the islands or somewhere, and just like explore the wines a little bit and get to grips with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many regions, right? So little by little, but that sounds fantastic.
So we'll have 27 countries next year. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we do already have English, don't we?
Yeah.
We have some English wines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one. Well, I don't want to say there's anything positive about climate change, but I think with climate change, England has become
it's going to change. Has
become a country where it's viable to kind of grow.
Yeah.
Wine.
So I mean, just for the listeners, like don't underestimate your purchasing power and how much good you can do by choosing to support smaller vineyards, local, all that kind of stuff. You know, the more you buy wines from these organic biodynamic vineyards, the more they can be sustainable, and the less this other stuff that's full of chemicals and like all sorts of spray and fertilizers. That wine's going to go away, and you know, if we all do that, then you know, like if we all buy organic eggs, for example, then eventually you won't have chickens in barns anymore. So like, don't underestimate as an individual how much power you can have. Like over your lifetime. By choosing to spend wisely.
Not just, and also for your own
health.
Less of a hangover. Which is true. Drink responsibly, though.
Drink Humble Grape wines if you want less of a hangover.
All right, that was all the questions.
Okay, cool. It's been really nice to see you. Thank you very much for setting this up.
Thank you. All right, cool.
Cool. Have a good day.
You too.
Yeah, thank you.